Nat Greene, welcome to the conversation today.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to our chat.
It is a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from New Hampshire. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about what young adults need to excel in careers and leadership in the middle 21st century. We're in a new day and age, a new world of work. We're in a place of constant disruption and change. The world is shifting around us. The sand underneath our feet, is moving. All the different analogies and metaphors we can throw out there. The reality is, young people today are going to need to be able to adapt in ways that perhaps, we've never had to before. So we're going to be exploring really what this means for young adults today, what types of skill sets, competencies, and capabilities are going to help them to be successful in their careers and to lead organizations of the future. And as we get started, I wanted to share Nat's bio with everybody. Nat Greene is the founder of Futures Forge, which helps gifted students develop the skills they need to excel in their careers, but are missing from traditional curricula. Nat studied undergrad at Oxford, founded and led Stroud International, a boutique management consulting firm, and has written books on problem solving and political polarization. He has four kids who are in the high school and college systems currently. There's so much about your background that we could highlight, but I'm going to pause there. Anything you would like to highlight for the audience before we dive on into the conversation?
Yeah, I just think on my journey, I went through the traditional sort of elite path, going off to college, starting at, getting into a business, starting a business, working in big companies. And midway through that, in my early 40s, I just kind of lost my way, got a bit burnt out for various reasons, some of it to do with family issues and so on. But what that did is it gave me a chance to reflect on what I was really interested in.
Mm,
And it turned out there were three things. Geopolitics, really
mm,
interested in geopolitics. I've lived
yep.
and worked and studied on three different continents and stuff. I have friends all over the world. I'm really interested in education. Like it's in my blood. My grandmother was a teacher, my mother was a teacher, my father-in-law was a teacher, my father was a university professor. I grew up in a university in Hong Kong.
Mm,
And then I'm also interested in disrupting things that aren't serving us. There's a lot
mm,
of stuff where people get into a rut. They're doing the same thing, a lot of inertia. And that is true in education as much as anywhere else I have seen.
yeah.
And so I didn't really think I could have much impact in the field of geopolitics. So I combined the other two things, my love for disrupting things that aren't servicing us and my great passion for education. And that's what I've been focused on recently. So that's why I'm happy to be here to talk to you about that today.
Well, that's really cool. And I share all of those loves. And the geopolitics stuff is also something I spend a lot of time and energy thinking about. And I
Mm.
also, with dismay, kind of throw my hands in the air, given the current state of things. And I wish I had more influence. I wish I could, drive some change there. But alas, but we make a difference where we can, and hopefully we can drive change in the world of education and career preparation. And, hopefully we can make a difference in our small sphere, and I believe we can. So yeah, let's have an awesome conversation as we dive on in. Let's start with just exploring, this young group of individuals. What do you think is unique about young adults today, younger millennial, Gen Z, students and workers, that are hit in the labor force, hitting the labor force? What sets them apart, makes them a little bit different?
Well, if we get down to fundamentals, I don't think anything does. It's very popular to say it does, but they're still human beings. They have the same
Yeah.
basic drivers. They want to be loved. They want to be successful. They want to feel self-esteem, make a contribution. So I think there's a lot of talk about the 5% that's different and not enough focus on the same basic things. And it's sort of like a practical approach that I take to everything. From a practical standpoint, it's just the same old stuff. And we seem to have forgotten that. Now, there are some unique circumstances some of them face. Some obvious ones, right? Like the impact of COVID. Okay, so obviously people are less socialized. I've had four kids who've gone through COVID.
Yeah.
But also, when they get into the workplace, there's this talk about how there's no one really there to mentor them. Well, of course not if you're working remotely. I mean, I've got two kids at the moment working remotely. For them to get the sort of water cooler, the side kind of input is much more difficult. So So the skills that you might have developed accidentally, inadvertently, on the spur of the moment, you've got to be much more intentional about now if you want to succeed. So I think that's an important point. And then that's sort of what my focus has then been on is what does it take to perform? What is practical for performance in the modern workplace? And a friend of mine, really smart guy, he said a while ago, do you know, people have lost their way so much on this skills development and everyone's distracted, all the talk about they're all on TikTok and it leads to a very shallow understanding that doesn't really train your mind well for critical thinking. If your kid just turns up on time, makes an effort to learn some critical skills, and is willing to go a little bit beyond sort of the bare minimum, they're going to be the top 10% of employees straight away. His
Right.
view, his view is it has never been easier to perform at work. Now you have to do those three basic things. So yeah, it's an exciting time. I mean, it's really easy. All you need to do is do a few basic things, and you're going to achieve.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I have six children. Sounds like about the same age of your children. My kids all went through COVID too. I've seen the exact same things as you've seen. I have two kids in college, two kids in high school, two kids in the younger ages. And so I'm just going to echo everything you just said. And then also, I told my kids as they're going through like just their, first jobs, going up even into college, kind of their first kind of more professional types of jobs. Like if you just want to be successful, exactly what you just said, like just be dependable, show up, like do what you're asked to do. Like that is the bare minimum. But honestly, if you do that consistently, you're going to be like in the top quartile of people, and then you can go from there. And you're smart and you're capable and you're going to learn quickly, and so that will move you up even faster, and so on and so forth, right? And so all of that is helpful to remind people. You also said something at the very beginning, which I just want to highlight, and that is we're all not that different, right? We're all pretty similar. And I think sometimes, older generations kind of look their nose down at younger generations and they talk about how they're entitled, or they talk about how, they want to, skip the steps that the older generations had to, kind of work their way up and blah, blah, blah. And you say all these different things. The reality is every generation went through that. Like when baby boomers were young, I guarantee you the older generations were talking about them that way too, right? Like every young generation gets talked about that way when they're the young generation, and then when they become the older generation, they talk about the young generation that way as well. And so it's partially just the natural way of things, life stage perhaps, just I don't know. It's the way we as humans, I guess, make sense of the world as we age, and go about change. And so, in part, I like how you're just trying to dispel that myth and just like trying to help us recognize that yes, we're largely the same. There are different circumstances. The reality is that younger people are digital natives. They grow up with technology in a way that older people haven't. That is a little bit different. That is unique. There is something there, right? COVID, there's something there, but largely we're the same, right? And so let's build off of that. Let's recognize that largely we're the same, and go from there. And if we do, then there's a lot more in common, the 90, 95+% of exactly the same stuff that we're developing from and building from. And there's a lot of potential. The other piece then is like, what does work look like today versus what did it look like, when I started out 20 plus years ago? What did it look like when my parents started out, when their parents started out? And that is something that has shifted a lot. It's fundamentally different today than it was, for my parents' generation and even for my generation. The nature of work, the level of disruption, technological, disruption and changes, the rate and pace of change, those things are different. And so, but those changes impact everybody, right? It's not just younger people that it impacts. It impacts everyone in the labor force across all different age demographics, and everyone has to be able to adapt. It's just that younger people don't have the experience to also lean on while they're trying to adapt, right?
Yeah, and so I think, look, what people are really interested in understanding is what does it take to succeed? Now,
Mm.
without worrying about how you personally define success, okay, because people define it in different ways, but
Yeah.
then from a generic sense, people have a sense what that is, and most people want the option to succeed. They want their employees to succeed, they want to succeed, and especially for parents, we want to help set our kids up on a path to success. And so if we look at how things have changed, the problem is the people leading our educational system are all in their 50s and 60s and 70s, and they have a legacy mindset. And that's partly why the system is so slow to change. So if we go back to when, I was at university and before, you had a batch learning process. Stuff went very slowly in the world. Things changed slowly. Now, we thought things were changing quickly, right? But comparison to where we're at now, they were changing very slowly. And so the path to success was go and learn knowledge for 4 years, and maybe a few very subject-specific skills. Like I did engineering. I learned certain analytical techniques linked to engineering. Uh, you know, Other people, you do social sciences, you learn specific techniques learned to that, but very specific skills. And then you went and worked for 40 years. And the problem is people say, what's the future of work now? And the only thing I can tell you is I have no idea. And anyone who claims they do is lying
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
deceiving themselves. Okay. So because we don't know that, this idea that we would have a batch knowledge gaining system based on knowledge when knowledge is already dead, like the monopoly on knowledge. Anything I want to learn, I can learn right now in 5 minutes. Anything I don't understand, I can find somebody online for free who will explain it to me. And I can find the best person in the world on my phone. And so the future of gaining knowledge is just in time knowledge, right? I'm motivated. When you're motivated to something, you learn like 5, 10 times better. Your attention is way better. So, you have that intrinsic self motivation. So the key, I think, for modern learning is recognize knowledge is dead. Those legacy systems are failing, right? We're losing 50 colleges a year in the United States, and that is going to accelerate. Okay. So what's going to replace it? Well, performance is based on skills, and there's a set of general skills that you need to learn that are generally applicable, that science is very clear about what they are. And also, if you survey businesses, especially businesses that want to hire the top talent, the sort of the stuff that you strive to do, the work on the problems that are really going to impact the world, there's a very specific set of skills that they're interested in, interpersonal, psychological, and cognitive skills. And so what we're focused on is two things. One is, Futures Forge is understanding what those skills are. Okay. And I've spent the last 2 years really digging deep into that. And then what we've realized is we started to, go out and act and do something and make change ourselves, initially with our summer program that we're running for high school students. What we're learning is, what we really need to focus on is the core skills that allow you to learn the skills, right? So
Mm.
what are those core skills? And so we're focused on developing self-awareness, teamwork, communications, critical thinking, and digital literacy, but from a very practical standpoint. Okay, not from sort of the ivory towers where I grew up as a kid, watching my parents, fellow professors debate, minutia sort of thing, but from a what does it really take early in your career to make an impact in the business world? And
Hmm.
I believe that those same skills apply more broadly, right, into other areas. And so we're focused on those things, and we're seeing tremendous results. But it turns out that nobody seems to be interested in building these practical skills. The academic institutions aren't doing them. The high schools aren't doing them. College certainly isn't. And there's very little focused application in businesses, especially on new employees. And so what happens is you have to either plot your own path if you're a motivated, talented person, ambitious person who wants to succeed. You have to plot your own path, or you have to rely on circumstance and happenstance. And I just think waiting for luck to, shine its light on you is not a strategy, right? And
Hmm.
you should
Hmm.
you should form a strategy. And so we're entirely focused on sort of solving this problem of why don't people understand that the future is about having generalized skills that allow you to perform now today in any field, no matter how work changes, and also that allows you to at the same time evolve and develop the skills that you need for tomorrow.
Yeah, it's all about the transferable skills. It's all about, sometimes people call them the soft skills, the transferable skills, the durable skills. whatever label you want to put on it, those critical thinking, communication, all the things you just said, right? And undergirding all of that, as you also just mentioned, it's essentially the ability to learn. Like, do you learn how to learn? Do you learn how to be a lifelong learner, to be able to be self-motivated? You know where to go to find good, credible information, how to consume that in a way that works for you, all of those things. Like that's what we all need to be able to figure out for ourselves. We need to, if we're leading a team, we need to help figure out how to foster that environment, that learning kind of environment within our team. Those are the types of things that we need to try to figure out that, traditional, education systems aren't particularly good at fostering, right? The traditional education systems are like follow the rubric, like do what we tell you to do. And you learn certain, competencies, learn how to write something, learn how to write an essay, you learn how to, give a presentation according to these steps, those sorts of things. That's not bad, but what, like you said, what we need is to be able to um, know where to go and what to do when we have something some new challenge that faces us that we never even knew we were going to encounter. There's no possible way that I know what's going to come 5 years from now. I can train students, for what they need to know today. I don't know what they're going to need to know 5 years from now. And some of what they need to know today might still apply, but I guarantee you a whole lot of what they need to know 5 years from now, I don't even have any clue what it is, and I don't even know what it is. And so how in the world do you teach it? You have the just-in-time kind of model that you described is absolutely what we need. And we all carry, in our pockets, the supercomputer that has like all the information in the world. And so what we need is technology literacy, data literacy. We need to understand how to curate knowledge and information and like what is valid, good, reliable sources and information that we can rely on, right? And that is half the battle right there because we're in a day and an age where there's so much disinformation and misinformation and people don't even know where to go to get good information.
Yeah, well, look, you cover a lot of good points. Let me touch on a couple, but first, I think the interesting thing is when I look at what it takes to create an environment where people can rapidly learn, I'm fortunate enough that I worked in that environment and helped create it in my consulting career, right? So we took some of the best students from the top universities, brought them in, and then helped them really learn how to perform. And we had really great retention, very positive results. For most of the time I ran the business, we won best small firm consulting firm to
Mm,
work for, according to Consulting Magazine. And that's because the staff were doing meaningful work, were succeeding and were learning. Okay. And
yeah.
so they're all advancing and they've all gone on to do great things. And so I get informed by that as well as the education system. And what you find in business has a reasonable motivational construct, right? So because it's more from an extrinsic standpoint, but there's some internal motivation created by the need to deliver a product or a project or some result, right? And I'm talking about high performance people working, on the tougher problems, right? Not just maintaining some system or whatever. I mean, there can be challenges there, but at the pointy end of the stick. And so there's a lot of motivation there, but often what they don't do is add the other pieces that are needed, which is time to actually work on getting better at how to perform, and then also the basics of the fundamental skills that allow that. And then if you look at education on the converse, the problem is that there's no motivational construct except to get a degree because then you might be successful. And so people go and learn stuff. And so I look at, one of my own children who has just graduated from a top global institution. And I watched him learning things, all kinds of technical things, and he had no idea what they applied to. Then he
Mm,
leaves and he gets a job. Now, he learned nothing about sales in his university career. Gets a job that involves sales. Well, he wants to be successful at that. He's reading books, listening to podcasts, talking to friends of mine who know a lot about sales. He's learning a ton. Like, why did he even go to college? I wonder at times. Now, look, I'm a big believer in education, but I just think it needs to transform. And I think of all the people I know working in the system, and I know that the transformation isn't coming from within. It's the classic innovator's dilemma. And so transformation is going to come by people incubating ideas outside and helping drive reform. And all the people, the motivation is wonderful. Like all the educators I know want to help people succeed. They care about the individuals. And the problem is that they're just in a structure that is focused on the wrong things. And
Yeah.
when you have to motivate people by saying, well, you need to learn this and regurgitate this so that you can prove that you know the material to get some grade that then gives you some GPA for a degree, right? When of everyone who starts in a 4-year degree, the largest chunk will never finish. The next chunk will go out and get a job that doesn't require a degree. The next chunk will get a job that says they need a degree, but doesn't need any specific degree, which means everything they learned bears no resemblance to what they're about to do. And then for someone like me who did an engineering degree, very technical, very vocational, I used maybe 5% of what I covered from a knowledge standpoint. And so again, this focus on knowledge versus skills is so way off, and yet it's pervasive because of the college impact. It goes down into high school. People don't focus on helping their kids develop the skills they need. And then people turn up in the workforce and it's sort of redundant. I mean, can you imagine someone turning up saying, oh, I've learned how to do this thing, but I don't know how to prompt an AI? And you go, why don't you know how to prompt an AI? Well, I wasn't allowed to use an AI to help complete my assignments at college. Well, why did you bother going to college? Because at work, if you don't use the AI to make you more efficiently, I'm going to counsel you, and then I'm probably going to terminate you. Okay, so it's so disconnected from real work. And they go, oh, but then how do we assess people? Well, you need to change your system. If you don't let your students use all of the productivity tools that are available right now, then you're just a Luddite. You might as well throw your clogs into the combine harvester, right? And have people reap by hand. And that might not be a popular view. Okay, I do get in trouble at times. I'm a bit outspoken, but it's the reality. And so I just think parents and employers need to recognize, and educators, of course, need to recognize what's going on, and they need to change. But the pace of change, it's so hard to do in the institution. So I'll give you an example. We ran our first 2-week summer program last year for students, and we worked really hard to develop this program, and we ran it for 2 weeks. And of course, we're interested in learning. We're applying all of the skills ourselves that we practice what we preach. So because it was our first session, we had a 1-week break in between before we ran our second session. And we tooled a whole bunch of stuff in that time. And so the second session was just better. But, in traditional education, there's no retooling the curriculum in a 3-day break over the 4th of July. And so you go, well, what are the results? Well, we also measure our results. So we're using a Net Promoter Score as a proxy at the moment because we don't have the ability yet to measure the progress on these exact skills. We will do in a few years, but we don't at the moment. So we're using a proxy, which is satisfaction, right? A Net Promoter Score. So the students in our first course gave us a 28, which is good, for first time. But in the second course, they gave us a 64. Now, perfect would be 100, and you can go from -100 to 100 on a Net Promoter Score. I'm sure a lot of your audience is familiar with it. But our parents, who are our customers, rated us an 85 because they're seeing their kids come back with a different perspective, motivation, and having started skills. And including some of the parents like, you've got to come teach this to my employees. Hey, where's like the book? That's why we're working on some books to explain this to them, because they're like, my kids have come back knowing this stuff. I don't even know it. It's embarrassing. Like, can you help me with that? So I think the thing is what people need to do is understand that practical performance in high performing jobs requires a set of skills that are well known and that are not being focused on. And I'll give you one last point. How do we know they're not being focused on? Well, every professor I know is organized by expertise, right? They're in the geography department. They're in the social sciences, they're in engineering. But of course, within engineering, there's several other sub-departments of expertise because, you're not just an engineer, you're a certain type of one. And as my father always said, the pursuit of academia is to know more and more about less and less until you know everything about nothing. Okay. And so
hyper specialize.
But if you ask them, oh, you're just teaching knowledge or very, very narrow specific skills, they go, no, we're also teaching things like critical thinking. And I go, oh, where's the evidence? Well, number one, there isn't any. If you don't measure it, unlikely it's happening. Number two, why isn't there a department for critical thinking? Why isn't there a department for teamwork? Why isn't there a department for building perseverance and resilience? Okay, the whole institution is organized incorrectly for creating the people that are going to solve tomorrow's problems. Okay, they're organized for a legacy time when knowledge was very expensive. Like if we're on a call now and we don't know something, like what's the atomic weight of iron? I don't know. Well, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we'd have to get up, walk across the street, go to the library, or look at our own books if we were wealthy enough to have it. But now we can just look it up on our phone. So the cost of the knowledge, the
You
value
don't
of the
even have to
knowledge
do
is
that.
teeny.
You all you have to do is say, "Hey Alexa" or "Hey
Yeah.
Siri."
Exactly. But it's instantly available. And so, but we're still organized in that old world where knowing the knowledge was valuable. And again, it was valuable. I knew certain things early in my career that to look it up would take too long. Now it's just not needed. And so the thing is what I'd encourage people to do is recognize that the entire system is structurally broken. And therefore, and you're not going to change it in the short term. I'm going to in the long term, but in the short term, you're not. So you have to fill the gaps for your new employees, for your existing employees, and specifically for your kids' education. And that's what you have to do. And you've got to find ways to develop those skills. And at Futures Forge, that's exclusively what we're dedicated to doing.
Yeah, awesome. So much there. I think we could go on and on. I love what you're saying, and I agree with so much of it. Nat, this has just been a great conversation. I do note the time, and I need to let you go here in just a minute. But before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word for today.
Yeah, so head to futuresforge.org. You should be able to find us. You can search for me, Nathaniel Greene, on LinkedIn. I'm sure there'll be some links with this podcast as well that will point you in the right direction. And sign up for our newsletter, but go read about the science, look at other things, and then we have a bunch of publications and booklets that are coming out in the next few months. So if you want to know more, make sure you stay connected and tuned to that, so you can look at that. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Nat. It's just been a pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Nat and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.